I had spent 15 years in the military, giving everything I had to serve my country. I had seen places most Americans never would, endured heat that could melt a man's soul, and felt the cold grip of fear more times than I could count. But I had done it willingly. I believed in the cause, in the men beside me, in the uniform on my back. Through it all, there was one thing that kept me going: Sarah. My wife. My anchor. The woman I wrote to from the far reaches of the world, whose voice had been my lifeline during long deployments. She had promised to wait for me, to stand by me no matter what. And I believed her. But life has a way of hitting you hardest when you least expect it. I had been gone for nearly a year, stationed overseas, when my deployment finally ended. I stepped off that plane, feeling the weight of my duffel bag but also a strange sense of lightness. I was home. I was finally going back to her. The house was the same as I left it, except it wasn't. The minute I stepped through the door, something felt off. The furniture had changed. My boots weren't by the door where I always kept them. And then I saw the letter on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I've moved on. Please don't try to find me." The air left my lungs. My knees nearly buckled. Sarah was gone. For a long moment I just stood there, staring at the letter. My hands trembled as I set my duffel bag down beside me. The house felt hollow, like a shell of what it used to be. The walls still held the pictures of us, our wedding day, vacations, moments that were supposed to mean forever. But they were nothing more than ghosts now. I walked through the house, room by room, trying to make sense of what had happened. Our bedroom was half empty. Her clothes, her jewelry, the little things she left on the nightstand, all gone. The closet door hung open, mocking me with the absence of her presence. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to breathe. I had faced war, seen death, survived hell. But nothing had prepared me for this. After a few minutes, I finally pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking as I scrolled through my contacts, stopping at Sarah's name. I hesitated before pressing the call button, knowing deep down that she wouldn't answer. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. Same result. Frustration and pain clawed at my chest. I wasn't the type to beg, but I needed answers. I needed to hear her voice, to understand why the woman who swore she'd be there was suddenly gone. Then, almost as if on cue, a message popped up on my screen. "Please stop calling. I've moved on. You should too." And just like that I knew, this wasn't a mistake. She had left me for someone else. The weight of her words crushed me. "I've moved on. You should too." Cold. Final. Like I was just another chapter she had closed and left behind. My hands clenched into fists as I read the message over and over, hoping, praying, that it was some kind of sick joke. But I knew better. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the place where she used to sit across from me, sipping her coffee, smiling like she had all the time in the world for me. That image shattered into a million pieces in my mind. Who was she with now? How long had this been going on? Had she been lying to me the whole time I was gone? I wanted to be angry. I should have been angry. But all I felt was numb. After what felt like hours, I finally forced myself to move. I needed answers. I opened the laptop we used to share and started digging. Social media, bank records, anything that might give me a clue. And then there it was. A photo. Posted just a week ago. Sarah, smiling in front of a beachside restaurant. Her arms wrapped around a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't just some guy. He was him. The one she left me for. I stared at his face, memorizing every detail. The easy smile. The confident posture. He looked like the kind of guy who had never seen a battlefield, never felt the weight of a rifle in his hands, never woken up in a cold sweat from memories that wouldn't let go. And yet, somehow, he had taken my wife. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had faced enemies on the battlefield, but this was different. This was personal. The man in that photo wasn't just some stranger. He was the reason my wife had abandoned me. I needed to know more. Who was he? Where did he come from? How long had this been going on? I scrolled through her profile, but Sarah had been careful. No personal details, no tags, nothing that could tell me where they were. But I wasn't stupid. I knew her habits, the places she loved, the way she thought. That restaurant in the background? It was in Miami. We had gone there once, years ago, for our anniversary. So she's in Florida now. I leaned back in my chair, my fist clenching and unclenching. A part of me wanted to pack my bag and go straight there, demand answers face to face. But what would that accomplish? She had made her choice. And if she had moved on that easily, then maybe I had been living in a lie for longer than I realized. I exhaled slowly, trying to push the anger down. This wasn't who I was. I wasn't going to let her, or him, turn me into something I wasn't. But I wasn't just going to let this go either. I opened another tab, searching for more details on the man in the photo. It didn't take long before I found him. His name was Eric Dawson, a real estate investor. Single, until recently. And the worst part? He wasn't just some random guy. He was someone Sarah had known before I deployed. A sick feeling twisted in my gut as I stared at Eric Dawson's profile. If Sarah had known him before I deployed, that meant this wasn't some whirlwind romance she stumbled into while I was away. No, this had been planned. I scrolled through his posts, piecing together a timeline. Photos from months ago, subtle comments from Sarah on his posts that I had never noticed before. It had been right in front of me, and I was too blind, too trusting, to see it. The realization hit like a bullet. She had started pulling away long before I left. The calls that grew shorter. The distant tone in her voice. The way she never said I love you first anymore. I had chalked it up to stress, to the difficulty of being apart. But the truth was uglier. She had already been slipping away while I was risking my life overseas. I pushed back from the table, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. I needed to get out of that house. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with memories of a life that no longer existed. Grabbing my keys, I walked out and got into my truck. I drove aimlessly for a while, the roads a blur beneath me. My mind raced with questions, each one more painful than the last. Had she ever really loved me? Had she been with him before I left? I pulled into an empty parking lot and gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. I had faced war, death, and destruction, but nothing had ever hurt like this. And yet I wasn't broken. Not yet. I sat there in my truck, staring at the darkened windshield, my fingers gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I had faced betrayals before, friends lost in combat, leaders making bad calls that cost lives, but this was different. This was the one person I thought I could trust. The one person who was supposed to be waiting for me. I thought about confronting her. About driving straight to Miami and demanding answers. But deep down, I knew there was nothing she could say that would change what had already happened. She had made her choice. Now, I had to make mine. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. My time in the military had taught me one thing: acting on emotion got people killed. I needed a plan, not reckless anger. First, the house. It was still legally mine. She had left, but if she thought she could take half of everything we built while she was off playing house with another man, she was dead wrong. I needed to talk to a lawyer, make sure she didn't try to screw me over financially on top of everything else. Second, I needed to figure out what came next for me. My entire world had been the military, then Sarah. Now both were gone. What the hell was I supposed to do now? I exhaled slowly, gripping the dog tags around my neck. I had survived war. I would survive this too. But one thing was certain: I would never let anyone put me in this position again. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house that no longer felt like home. The silence was deafening, the absence of Sarah's presence like a phantom haunting every corner. But I refused to let the grief consume me. I had work to do. The first call I made was to a divorce attorney. I wasn't about to let Sarah walk away with half of everything I had worked for, not after what she had done. The lawyer, an older guy named Mitchell Parker, listened patiently as I laid out the situation. She abandoned the marriage, I told him. I was overseas serving my country, and she left me for another man. Mitchell sighed. That's low, but the law doesn't always care about morality. We'll fight to make sure she doesn't take what she isn't entitled to. Do you have any proof of infidelity? I thought about the pictures of her and Eric Dawson, the timeline I had pieced together. Yeah, I said. I have proof. Good. That'll help. By the time I hung up, I felt a small sense of control returning. She might have blindsided me, but I wasn't going to let her destroy me. The second thing I did was close our joint bank account. If she needed money, she could ask Eric for it. I wasn't funding her new life. Then, I sat down with a notebook and started making a list of my next steps. My military career had taught me that even in chaos, you needed a plan. Step 1, protect my assets. Step 2, focus on my future. Step 3, never let this happen again. I wasn't the same man who left for deployment. That man had believed in love, in loyalty. This man? This man was done being a fool. Days passed, but the anger didn't fade. If anything, it hardened into something colder, something sharper. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. But I was changed. Sarah hadn't reached out, not even once. No apology, no explanation, just silence. And that told me everything I needed to know. She didn't feel guilty. She didn't regret what she did. She had moved on without a second thought, expecting me to just accept it. But I wasn't built that way. One evening, after another long call with my lawyer, I found myself scrolling through Eric Dawson's social media again. I knew it wasn't healthy, but I wanted to understand the kind of man who had taken my wife. What I found made my blood boil. His posts were full of expensive vacations, flashy cars, and pictures of Sarah by his side, grinning like she had won the lottery. It wasn't just that she had left me, it was how quickly she had replaced me. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. A comment from one of his friends under a picture of Sarah and Eric at a bar. Did she ever tell him, or is he still in the dark? My heart pounded. Tell me what? I clicked the profile of the guy who had commented. Scrolling through his posts, I saw a picture from nearly a year ago, Eric, laughing with a woman who wasn't Sarah. A woman who looked eerily familiar. My stomach twisted. Sarah hadn't just moved on. She had left me for a man who had been playing her the whole time. I stared at the photo, my mind racing. The woman in it, brunette, tall, elegant, looked nothing like Sarah. But the way she clung to Eric, the way he held her close, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some casual friend. This was his woman. Or at least, she had been. I scrolled through more of the guy's posts, piecing together the timeline. Eric had been with this woman. Her name was Vanessa, for years. Right up until a few months before Sarah left me. I exhaled sharply, realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. Sarah wasn't Eric's first choice. She was his backup plan. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. She thought she had traded up, left me for something better, but she had walked straight into another lie. For a moment, I considered messaging Vanessa, telling her everything. But no, I wasn't about to get tangled in their mess. If Sarah wanted to believe Eric was her happily ever after, let her. Sooner or later, she'd find out the truth. Instead, I sent the screenshot to my lawyer. Just in case, I typed. I didn't know if this would help in the divorce proceedings, but it sure as hell didn't hurt to have proof that Sarah had left me for a guy who had been cheating on someone else. I put my phone down, my heart steadier than it had been in weeks. For the first time since I came home, I wasn't drowning in anger or grief. I wasn't the one who had lost everything. She was. She just didn't know it yet. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and quiet realizations. The house was mine, Sarah had no legal claim to it, and my lawyer made sure she wouldn't get a dime more than she deserved. She didn't even fight for it. Maybe she thought her new life with Eric was worth more than anything we built together. Good. Let her have it. I stopped checking her social media, stopped wondering when the illusion would break for her. Because, deep down, I knew it would. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, she'd wake up and realize she had left a man who would have done anything for her, for someone who saw her as disposable. And by then, I'd be long gone. I focused on myself. I reconnected with old friends, guys I had served with who understood what it was like to come home to a world that had moved on without them. I started hitting the gym again, running in the mornings, clearing my head 1 mile at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I thought about the future. The military had been my life, but now, I had to build something new. A fresh start. Maybe I'd move to another state, maybe I'd start a business, maybe I'd just take things one day at a time. All I knew was this: Sarah was my past. And I was done looking back.